We're in part 5 now of cells and transport mechanisms, actually, and we'll move on to organelles. But first, the transport, active transport, is the next item. And it says right here on page 73 in part 5 that we have active transport requiring the use of ATP. So we have something called primary active transport, and then we have secondary active transport. The primary one is in which we pump something directly. Let's have an example here of the direct version. I've drawn something out here, and in a direct version, we have a membrane here. These are phospholipids. I like to draw these phospholipids this way with a phosphate head and a fatty acid tail. So here we have membrane. We have the, let's push this up a little bit. We have the outside of the membrane out here. We have the inside of the membrane, and there we go. And so we have, these are the phospholipids with the fatty acid tails facing into the membrane, inside, outside. And here we have a pumping system, as you can see, and we're going to be pumping sodium out. All cells do this. Primarily, the extracellular fluid is rich in sodium as the primary electrolyte, and the inside of cells, the intracellular fluid is rich in potassium. So this is a normal feature of all cells in the human body, all 50 trillion. And the mechanism that we use is ATP. By metabolizing one molecule of glucose, we get 38 ATPs without reference to membrane transport. So we have a lot of ATP from the food and the diet. We break it down into, from the triphosphate to the diphosphate, we break off a phosphate. We have energy, and we use the energy to pump. So we're pumping the sodium out, the potassium in. The sodium then is in high concentration on the outside, and here we have what's called a SIM port. That is to say, it's a dual port, and it requires two molecules or ions, either way, to fill these seats. Once the two seats are filled, there's an allosteric change in shape. We call that allostery, a change in shape of the transmembrane protein, and both come through. We already have sodium in the seat. We have sodium in the seat because we're pumping sodium out of the cell here across the membrane to the outside, and it seats itself in the available seat. Over here we have another seat. Usually it will be occupied specifically by a essential nutrient. So that essential nutrient might be glucose. It might be an amino acid. It might be vitamins, and so on. There's a number of variables that can happen. In this case, we have a seat here for glucose. So glucose, all it has to do is seat itself, and it goes through because there's lots of sodium. And in fact, we can get all the glucose. Do you understand why we can get all the glucose? So as long as we've eaten something, we eat an item that happens to have either pure glucose in it, which is somewhat rare, but it might have some starch in it, and we break down the starch into glucose, and then we place the glucose here. We're going to get all of it, right down to the last glucose, because what we do for a living is have lots and lots of sodium right here. So this seat is always filled. This seat is going to get filled whenever we have food to eat. Okay? And it comes through. And so this is considered secondary active transport. It's active because it's using ATP, and we're getting transport across the membrane. Ultimately, we're getting transport into the bloodstream, and so we're getting our nutrients this way. Okay, so that is primary and secondary active transport. So the primary active transport is acting together with this diffusion gradient right here and setting up a diffusion gradient, which then forces this passive portion of secondary transport to continue. Okay, then we have an example here of where we're going to be collecting some items from the outside of the cell, foreign particles or nutrients as the case may be, and we're going to be bringing them into the cell. We're going to be bringing them in, metabolizing them, waste products, whatever is here will be used in one way or another, waste products will be disposed of. Okay, so here is a cell basically that is ingesting, it's an active transport system, and metabolizing, and then exporting the results, which would be the waste products. Okay, so here they're giving us some detailed developments. In some cases, we can actually identify which molecules we want to get. Okay, and so we're having receptors. There's a receptor up and a down syndrome that's possible. So when we need to communicate with, how shall I say, coherent dialogues within the body, cells can pick up particular molecules of interest, and then they'll be absorbed within the cell, and actions will be taking place, just the way you like it.